These are the men of the 2nd Marine Division. We're now embarking on a full-scale amphibious operation after many months of intensive training. The transports are combat-loaded. The ships of the Navy and Coast Guard form our convoy. Squadrons of carrier planes cover us in the sky. Several days from our destination, a destroyer brings us...
The invasion will be a two-pronged assault. While Marines make an amphibious landing at Tarawa, Enterprise will support the simultaneous invasion of Macon by soldiers from the Army's 27th Division. The two forces will attempt to capture both atolls at the same...
The Tarawa Atoll is formed by the multiple islands, forming a chain around a large lagoon. On the last island to the west, Besho, Japanese forces constructed an airfield. For the landings on Besho Island, the Navy assigned the 2nd Marine Division, under the command of Major General Julian C. Smith. The plan of the attack was straightforward. The invasion fleet was to approach the Tarawa Atoll from the west, and landing on the Besho was to be done from the lagoon's side. The planners decided to launch the attack from the lagoon, expecting lighter fortifications and lighter defense on the northern side of the island. The north coast of the Besho was divided into 3 landing beaches, codenamed, from the west to east as, Red 1, Red 2, and Red 3. The western coast was given a code name Green Beach. The 3rd Battalion, of the 2nd Marine Regiment, under the command of Major John Shertle, were to land on Red 1. The 2nd Battalion, 2nd Marines, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Herbert Amey, were to land on Red 2, and the 2nd Battalion, 8th Marine Regiment, under the command of Major Henry Crowe, would land on Red 3. The other battalions of the 2nd and 8th Marine would land on Besho Island in the 2nd and 3rd wave, while the 6th Marine Regiment would be held in the reserve. The 3 battleships, 2 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and the destroyers of Task Force 53, were to provide artillery support for the landing troops. The air cover, aerial bombing, and strafing, was the task of carrier-based aircraft from the 3 aircraft carriers, the Essex, Bunker Hill, and Independence. The Besho is a small island, with an area of just 1.5 square kilometers. Surrounded by the coral reef. The coral reef would not present an obstacle for the first 3 waves of infantry, as they were to land on shore in tracked LVTs. However, the rest of the troops were to come ashore in the Higgins boats. The planners did not have sufficient knowledge about the tide in a lagoon. They expected the normal rising tide to provide a sufficient water level over the reef, enough for the Higgins boats to pass this natural obstacle. This was the Japanese defense. The Japanese High Command was well aware of the importance of the Gilbert Islands. On such a small island, the Japanese placed a garrison with almost 5,000 men, under the command of Rear Admiral Keiji Shibazaki. Because of the small area of the island, a considerable amount of which was taken up by the airfield, and its facilities, Shibazaki concentrated his efforts on defeating the invader at the water's edge. Consequently, the beach defenses were formidable. Along the entire coastline, the Japanese troops built a series of trenches, strong points, gun emplacements, concrete bunkers, and shelters. 40 artillery pieces, and many more anti-aircraft heavy machine guns, were scattered around the island in various reinforced firing pits. At 5 a.m. on November 20, 1943, a naval bombardment began. Gunfire from the battleships and cruisers lit the sky. Artillery barrage was so fierce that one admiral said, "We do not intend to neutralize the island, we do not intend to destroy it, we will obliterate it." However, artillery is well known to produce more noise than damage. At 6 a.m., the aircrafts started their bombing run. The artillery barrage lasted until 9 a.m., when the amphibious assault began. As soon as the barrage stopped, surviving Japanese troops left their shelters and took their positions. The first waves of the Marines begin their approach to the beach, expecting that the Besho defenses had indeed been obliterated. As they get to the firing range of the defenders, suddenly they faced devastating Japanese fire. The tracked LVTs did not offer sufficient protection against anti-aircraft guns. Some LVTs were blown away by point-blank artillery fire. The resistance on Red 1 and Red 2 was especially fierce. Companies assigned for landing in the first wave suffered heavy losses and were reduced to 50% of the strength as they reached the shore. Faced with heavy fire, LVTs on the way to the Red 1 beach were forced to veer off course, heading far to the west or the east towards Red 2 beach. A group of the Marines landed ashore at the junction of the Red 1 and Green Beach. Major Michael Ryan, commander of L Company, 3rd Battalion 2nd Marine, was among them. Immediately, he took command of this mixed force of the Marines from various companies, LVT drivers, heavy weapons crew, engineers and signalers. On the Red 2 beach, Marines faced rows of enemy emplacements. The first waves of troops suffered heavy losses. The beach was crowded with casualties. Those who managed to survive were forced to seek the cover. Under covering fire of the destroyers Ringgold and Dashiell, the 2nd Battalion, 8th Marine, landed on Red 3 beach with minimal losses. Although they made limited progress inland, their main concern was to hold the arrival of Japanese reinforcements from the eastern part of the island. After about 2 hours of fighting, the Marines finally get the leader. At 10:30 am, Colonel David M. Shoup, a divisional operations officer, reached the shore. Although wounded in the leg, he assumed the command of the forces on the Red 2 and Red 3 beach. At 11:30 am, 3rd Battalion 8th Marines started their approach towards Red 3. They would come ashore by Higgins boats. Nightmare scenario unfolded, as the Higgins boats grounded on the coral reef. The Marines had to reach the shore by walking through the shallow water for a few hundred meters, under the devastating Japanese fire. The losses were horrifying. Seeing what was going on at the reef, General Smith cancelled the landing of the 1st Battalion 8th Marines. Japanese defenders never received an order to attack. No one was alive who could issue it. The night has passed relatively quiet. There was sporadic fire exchange and nothing else. The first daylight brought the certain relief among the Marines, although they were aware that a new day brings new heavy fighting. The beginning of the second day was almost exactly like the first. After spending most of the first day and the night embarked in their Higgins boats, without the use of toilet, food or drink, the 1st Battalion 8th Marines received the order to head for Red 2. With the first lights of dawn, they went. The Higgins boats again grounded on the reef, and a long walk towards the shore began. They met the same fate as the 3rd Battalion. Only half of them reached the shore. During the morning, the time has come for Major Ryan's group to play their role in the battle. In a perfectly coordinated attack, destroying one enemy emplacement after another, they went all along the Green Beach, reaching the pair of 203mm naval guns by 11 am. The beachhead on the western coast of the island was now clear. General Smith decided to use this unexpected gain. During the afternoon, he ordered the landing of the 1st Battalion 6th Marine Regiment, held in reserve, to land on the Green Beach. By the evening, the 1st Battalion 6th Marine completed the landing unopposed. On the Red 2 and Red 3 sector, heavy fighting raged all day, as the Marines tried to reach the south coast of Besho. During the day, the first 75mm howitzers arrived on shore, followed by more heavy weapons. The tide of the battle began to shift in the Americans' favor. At 4 p.m., Colonel Shoup sends a situation report to division headquarters, with now famous phrase, "Casualties many, percentage dead not known, combat efficiency, we are winning." By the end of the second day, a small group of Marines from the 2nd and 8th Marine Regiments succeed in crossing the airfield, reaching the southern coast of Besho Island. Throughout the day, without proper leadership, the Japanese were disorganized. As the night fell on the second day, they were no longer the force that presented a threat. It was their turn to wait for the night with worry. At the beginning of the third day of fighting, on November 22, General Julian Smith ordered the 3rd Battalion 6th Marine to land on the Green Beach. Meanwhile, the 1st Battalion 6th Marine began the advance eastward, to clear the pocket between Green Beach and Airfield, to link with men of the 2nd Marine. The 8th Marine was ordered to push the enemy further to the east. Close combat raged all day. The Japanese troops, hidden in concrete bunkers, fought to the last man. The distance between the enemies was often less than a few meters. Destroying bunker by bunker, the Marines slowly advanced. By the end of the third day, the Marines held the western two-thirds of Besho Island. During the night, Marines experienced something that was to become familiar throughout the Pacific Theater, the famous Banzai Charge. Although failed, the Banzai Charge inflicted significant losses to defending Marines. By 1 p.m., on November 23, 1943, all resistance ceased, last enemy pockets have been cleared. The Besho Island was in American hands. Fighting on the small islands of Tarawa Atoll lasted a few more days. The victory came costly. 1,009 Marines died, and more than 2,000 were wounded. Out of almost 5,000 Japanese defenders, only 17 soldiers were captured. The start of the island hopping did not turn out as the Navy expected. At least now, the Navy knew what to expect in the upcoming months. Besho Island on Tarawa Atoll was the first stop on the long road, which will last for 2 more years.